This summer in Moscow has brought the kind of mass sustained protest that we haven't seen here for years. And what we've also seen are scenes of police violence, protesters being beaten in the streets. I think a lot of this really is about those elections. A whole group of opposition candidates were blocked from registering to run. Now, they were angry, but the people who'd signed to support them were angry too. They felt that they were being ignored, overlooked, treated like they didn't matter. And that's the thing that you see on a lot of the signs at the protests here. And what you hear about when you ask them why they're joining these demonstrations.
It's crisis, political crisis, because we are peaceful, without weapon, without aggression, but many people 1 week ago was beaten in the street.
I think those protests might have faded away, though. They have in the past, and that could have happened again if it hadn't been for the very heavy-handed way that these protests were dealt with. The real crunch day, I think, was July the 27th. That's when police essentially beat peaceful protesters with their batons. Very shocking scenes that were captured on cameras and mobile phones and spread like wildfire on social media. And that has been fueling these protests even further. Almost all those opposition candidates are now in custody. One of them, Lyubov Sobol, has been detained multiple times and bundled into a police van. And the protesters themselves, more than 2,000, have been arrested, a lot of them fined or placed in short-term custody. And now there's a whole new stage to it. There is a criminal prosecution that's been opened. More than a dozen of the protesters facing up to 8 years in jail. Now that's for what the authorities have now designated a riot, although almost all the violence in these protests has come from the police. And at the latest massive rally, the biggest one so far on the 10th of August, that was a real rallying cry. A lot of the speakers saying that these are now political prisoners and they have to be released. And there's another new twist now with a lot of celebrities, including rappers and musicians with huge followings amongst young Russians who are joining the protest movement.
I think people are speaking out and, I'm here for the first time ever. I've never been to a protest in my life, so.
Why now? Why did you join this one?
The boiling point has been reached. I guess that's it.
So what about the man in charge himself, Vladimir Putin? When the police were beating protesters here in Moscow, Vladimir Putin was going to the bottom of the Baltic Sea in a mini submarine. And when the biggest protest in years was gathering here in Russia's capital, Vladimir Putin was meeting aging bikers in Crimea and describing them as if they were a great role model for today's young Russians. And for a long time, Vladimir Putin has been extremely popular here. His message that Russia's a strong country again has chimed with a lot of people. But the economy is starting to suffer now, partly because of Western sanctions, partly the oil price. But people are feeling the pinch, they're feeling poorer. And Mr. Putin's support rating has begun to slide. And I think the tough response to these protests shows just how worried those in power here actually are.